In this video, I'm going to be responding to some of the comments that I've gotten on a recent video that I did. I'm putting all of you on blast! Just kidding, that's not the point of this video. I just wanted to share some of the responses that I got from the video we did because I think they were very educational and they helped change my mind about some things. The video in question is the 5-horse training methods I would never use, and I did this a few weeks ago, and I talked about the training methods that I particularly don't like and that I want to stay away from. The reason I did that video was to be a conversation starter because there were some training methods I didn't really know a whole lot about, and so I did want feedback. People were very respectful in the comments and they really did shed some light on other situations, and so I thought we would talk about that today. I also had people asking for some clarification about some things that I had said, and this was particularly on using martingales and using spurs and things like that. I had said that I don't like to use excessive equipment. I don't like to use spurs and I don't like to use martingales or anything where you're like tying the horse to itself. What I had noted in that video is using excessive equipment usually means that there could be a gap in the training. With martingales in particular, what they do is they attach to the bridle and then they attach to the horse's chest, and so they keep the horse from raising its head up. But in reality, it's not really fixing the problem, it's just restraining the horse. So to fix that problem of a horse just having a higher head carriage, you really need to teach the horse to be soft and supple with the bit and getting them rounding through their back and neck, and they will naturally become more to where they're carrying themselves with a lower head. And oftentimes you'll see young horses carry their heads like straight up in the air and they're really unbalanced and they're inverted all the time, but that's really a lack of muscle. Like, they need time to build the muscle to be supple and be round. And so if you are dealing with that and you ride a horse that has a martingale, you can correct that issue relatively easily. So I would just recommend that you look into that. And none of this is to condemn anyone or anything like that. It's just to provide solutions for the questions people were asking. A lot of people were also asking about spurs and basically asking, well, if you have a lazy horse, sometimes you're gonna have to use spurs and that's really the only option. So my challenge to people with that would be, I feel like we limit our horses when we think that way. Like, a horse can be trained to do anything. You know, they are very shapeable and moldable, and once they trust you, man, you could get them to jump off a tower, which is what I was talking about. This lady had trained her horses to dive off a 40-foot tower into the pool of water. And so if you can train a horse to do that, I'm sure you can train a horse to respond to a lighter pressure and not needing spurs. I do understand that some people use spurs beyond just for pressure. They use it to get the horse responsive to like lateral movements and things like that. When I'm training my horses and what I'm focusing on is I'm trying to better any solution. Like, if you think about it, the ideal situation for training your horse would be able to ride your horse without any tack, without any bridle, without any rope. Like, ideally, if you can get your horse to the place where you are just free of anything, I feel like that is when you have accomplished the top level of horse training. I'm not there yet. And, you know, a lot of people aren't there yet. So, like I said, no condemnation with this, but it is just a thought process change where, for me personally, I want to shift my thinking to where I can work with my horse and train them to be able to accept pressure without the need of like a spur or a whip or things like that. The biggest point I wanted to address today and read the comments about was the point I made about I don't want to use training methods where the horse is allowed to say no. And so this wasn't a topic I knew much about. I'd just heard about it. Sometimes people take things to an extreme. So the only thing I had really ever heard about it, I believe, was the extreme. A lot of people in the comments provided good explanations for it, and that's why I want to read that. Maybe I'm being a little picky with this, but I just believe it's one of those things where maybe if you just change the wording, people would be much more accepting to it. So for example, I've learned that when I talk about respect-based training, that turns off a lot of people, and I totally understand why, because they relate it to like dominant training. But when I say respect-based training, what I mean is just teaching your horse boundaries and to respect your boundaries. So I've learned how to change my wording so that people will be more accepting of that. Instead of saying respect-based training, I say I teach my horse boundaries. And so I think it's kind of the same thing where it's like maybe just changing the wording around it would make people more willing to accept it. And like I said, I may just be being picky. Let's jump into the comments. I'm not going to read off the name of the people who left the comments just because I don't want to embarrass anyone. I don't think what they're saying is bad at all, but you know, sometimes people just don't like being mentioned. So I'm just going to read what they wrote. Talking about letting your horse say no, this person says, I allow my horses to say no, but there is more to that than it seems. Teaching them that they are able to say no to something and that we understand their communication. There are many reasons a horse could say no, just like we have many reasons to say no to the horse. It's much safer to allow the horse to walk away saying no to a new thing. It's a training opportunity to show the horse that new things are not dangerous and can mean happy things. It's teaching us to listen and be patient while teaching the horse to accept new things. We build a bond, and their no happens less and less. Horses saying no to each other all the time like we do with other people. Allowing my horse to say no has led to horses wanting to say yes to new things. We taught them that we have great ideas for things to do together. So their curiosity overrides their caution when it's a new thing. They come to us to ask for engagement of some type, grooming, going for walks, napping, training, things like that. So from that comment there, it kind of drew a different picture for me when it came to letting your horse say no. So that person was using it as an explanation for like when you're introducing a horse to something new, the horse is unsure about it, giving them time to kind of process the situation rather than just throwing them into the fire is what I gathered from that. And they also pointed out communication, like being able to recognize when your horse is uncomfortable with something, and instead of just pushing them on with that, like taking a moment to come back and regather and like wonder why they're responding that way. I thought this comment was a really good explanation of letting your horse say no. This person said, I let my mare say no because it's a sign that I've got a gap somewhere in her training that we haven't overcome yet. So that to me introduced me to the concept again where it's like, okay, if your horse isn't willing to accept this thing, are they ready to do it? And if so, what could you do to make them more ready for it? She used to yank your hooves out of your hands when you picked her feet up, but by establishing a consent cue where she touches her nose to the hoof pick before we pick up her feet, it gave her time to balance herself and anticipate picking up her feet. Now she doesn't need the consent cue anymore and she just picks up her feet and holds them like a dream. This was interesting because this is actually something I've been doing with our young horse Ruach. He's learning to pick up his feet. One thing I've been doing is instead of just like reaching down and grabbing his feet and picking him up, I will go and I'll stand next to his leg until he like will cock his leg and relax it. Because that way I know he's ready for me to pick it up. Like he just is a little unbalanced, so he'll be really wiggly. But I've noticed every time I've let him like cock his leg and prepare, and then I pick up his foot, he's like way more willing to do it. This was another good explanation this person shared. They said, also we had an incident where we were surprised by some cows that really scared my mare. She wanted to trot in a circle and get away. So we walked a little ways away from the cows and decompressed, waiting for her to completely calm down, which took about 15 minutes. And then we slowly brought her a little closer. Over the next few weeks, we brought her a little closer, but never pushed her over the threshold to where she would spook again. And now she is so excited to see her cow friends and loves going right up to them and grazing next to them on the other side of the fence. I think typical horsemanship would say that we should have forced her closer instead of turning back. But I know for a fact that those baby steps allowed her to grow immensely and became more confident. From personal experience, again, like I agree with this statement, like with Tucker, he tends to be a more sensitive horse, and I've realized like with desensitizing, I can go and I can force him to accept something. Like in one, in a training session, he'll go from being terrified with the tarp to then, okay, I can put it on him, and then we call it a day. But the next day I go and do it, he is just as unaccepting as he was the initial time. Compared to when I force him into something, he's much more accepting of something that we work on long term and progressively. It just helps him like mentally accept what's going on a lot more. This person points out really the only time a horse would feel like saying no is number 1, if it's uncomfortable, number 2, if it's scared, number 3, if it's confused, and number 4, if it's in pain. And so they're pointing out the things that, like if you see your horse like balking or not wanting to do something, these are the reasons why. And I find that viewpoint interesting. It is something I'm gonna have to research more. I don't know, it's a thought shift. It's a different thought process than I'm used to, but I still do think like some horses are just being stubborn. I mean, they're just like humans and they're not doing it to be malicious. I don't think horses can do that, but sometimes horses just don't want to do things. And so when it comes to that aspect, that's where I wonder. Someone had a question that I'll ask here and people can comment. Like if your horse just continually says no and they're just saying no because they don't want to do something, like their example was getting on the horse trailer. Like, so I guess the point is to make it fun for the horse to get on the horse trailer, like feed them or something in there. So comment down below and tell me what you think about that, because that's kind of where I am too. It's like, well, if you're letting the horse say no, they can just choose to keep saying no over and over again. And I know they don't have the mental faculties we do, and so it's easier to like shape their responses and their answers and things like that. So that is something I'd want to know more about. So for me personally, what this training method looks like to me is just being in tune with your horse and realizing when they are uncomfortable with something or why they are feeling a certain way, and then taking the steps to help them feel better about it. And I feel like that to me is a good explanation of letting your horse say no. And I mean, I use those methods myself. I just wouldn't phrase it like letting the horse say no, because in the end, I'm not really letting the horse say no. I'm just coming back and reevaluating where we're at and then doing things to fix the situation so that the horse will be more willing to accept it. But like I said, I feel like maybe if you change the wording, people would be much more willing to accept the principle. Like I said earlier, I've made this video to be a conversation starter, and I've found anytime I've had a big mind shift, it's always come with me initially disagreeing with something, but then someone being willing to explain something to me respectfully, and that just goes a long way. So anyway, comment down below what you think. I'd love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more weekly horse videos.